Hello, I'm Jacob Stein. I'm an asset protection attorney in Los Angeles, California, and welcome to this quick and to-the-point presentation on offshore asset protection planning. There are many different ways of protecting assets. There are many different ways of protecting assets using US-based structures, domestic asset protection structures. So there are so many ways of protecting assets within the United States. Why do we need offshore asset protection planning? What is offshore asset protection planning? The basic premise of asset protection planning is to do what? To make it more difficult and more expensive for a creditor to come after your assets. And we generally accomplish that by taking assets that you own and making them into assets that you do not own, right? Transferring ownership of the assets into some sort of a legal structure. The legal structures that we most commonly use in the United States are structures like transferring assets to trusts, to limited liability companies, to spouses, and into private retirement plans. What do we do overseas and why? There are two reasons why an offshore asset protection structure is superior to a domestic, a US-based asset protection structure. So the first one is there are jurisdictions out there, there are countries out there that have intentionally changed their laws to make themselves more asset protection friendly in the hopes of attracting our business, in the hopes of attracting your business. Right? There are countries that have changed their trust laws to make it so much more difficult for a creditor to pierce the trust or to reach the assets of a trust. There are countries that have made their LLC laws more asset protection friendly. So I'll give you an example. Very frequently we will set up our offshore asset protection trust in St. Vincent. And the full name of the country is St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and it's located in the West Indies. Why do we use St. Vincent? Well, St. Vincent does not recognize US judgments if somehow the US judgment affects a St. Vincent-based trust. Which means that if our client is being sued in the United States and we move his assets into a St. Vincent trust, what will happen? The US-based judgment is not enforceable in St. Vincent. And if the US-based judgment is not enforceable in St. Vincent, what can the plaintiff do? Well, the only thing that the plaintiff can do is they can go to St. Vincent and file a lawsuit in St. Vincent for a fraudulent transfer, a lawsuit against the trustee of a foreign trust, alleging that the transfer of the assets to the foreign trust was a fraudulent transfer. Well, if this is the only way they can go after the assets of the trust, do you think the laws of St. Vincent make it difficult or easy to get at the assets of the trust, to allege that it's a fraudulent transfer? They make it so difficult that it has never been done. It's a 2-year statute of limitations on making a fraudulent transfer argument. And the plaintiff has to prove the fraudulent transfer beyond a reasonable doubt. The criminal law standard, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt. It's impossible. It has never been done. And there are many other restrictions that the laws of countries like this place on the creditor's ability to reach assets, especially of a trust. Okay? So on the one hand, the reason why these jurisdictions may be superior to the United States is because they have enacted laws that are asset protection enablers, in a sense. The other reason why these jurisdictions may be superior is from a practical standpoint. From a practical standpoint, a judge based in the United States has no jurisdiction in St. Vincent and the Grenadines or in any other foreign country, right? From a practical standpoint, the perception that we are creating is that the assets are now a lot more difficult and a lot more expensive to pursue. And they are a lot more difficult and a lot more expensive to pursue. To pursue assets in Switzerland, in the Cook Islands, in St. Vincent, and Nevis, in Singapore, Hong Kong, what would the plaintiff need to do? They would need to hire a local attorney, and that's expensive. And then this local attorney will need to go after the assets of the structure that we have set up, a structure that relies on these asset protection enabled laws. That's really, really difficult to do. Very, very few plaintiffs are able to do this successfully, and it costs them a lot of money. And it takes a lot of time, right? And so the odds of success of pursuing an offshore structure is very small. The cost is high. So the perception that we are creating is that these assets are nearly impossible to get at. In my experience, and I've set up several hundred of these offshore structures, never once had a creditor or a plaintiff successfully reached the assets of an offshore structure. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible. It is certainly possible. There are circumstances where a plaintiff may be able to reach the assets of an offshore structure. We've never experienced it. That's how rare it is. We are big believers in offshore asset protection planning, but offshore asset protection planning does not work for all assets. It really only works for those assets that we can move overseas, which means it doesn't work for your residence. It doesn't work for your business, right? It works for liquid assets, for fungible assets, assets that we can physically move to a foreign country. So sometimes, an aggressive asset protection structure would have our client sell all of his physical assets in the United States, convert them into cash, into liquid form, and then move that cash overseas. And then we envelope that cash in an offshore asset protection structure. That is something that works, I would say, in over 99% of cases. That is a very effective way of protecting assets from claims of creditors. I'm Jacob Stein, and I hope you've enjoyed this quick presentation on offshore asset protection planning. Thank you.